He said it almost with a laugh, as if tossing out bait to the world. "I will give 1,000,000 to whoever heals me." He sat beneath an old plane tree where a man used to getting his way could enjoy one more luxury: silence. In his world, everything stayed at arm's length: money, guards, clinics, promises. He kept people farther still, children worst of all. Their freedom and noise grated like grit in the eye. His left side refused to answer. His right side answered late. His mind was clear, his tongue precise and unkind, and pushing people away had become his only sport. The courtyard was loud. Rubber on swing chains squeaked. Wet earth smelled sweet. Cotton candy drifted in from the gate. A knot of kids played doctor with a plastic stethoscope and paper hats over T-shirts. He leaned back and gave a tiny snort. Doctors, sure. Let them try to achieve anything except nice speeches and bigger bills. When the boy stopped in front of him, he did not look up at once. He noticed hands first, clean but picked at the cuticles, then a shoelace tied in a double knot. Then the eyes. Not defiant, not pleading, attentive. The boy fished out a tiny bundle and unfolded it carefully on the man's knees. Thin threads, a ribbon, a flat striped pebble, a faded child photo in a dull frame. His hands moved in a whisper. No grand words, no pose. He watched and, to his irritation, did not feel the usual boredom. Inside something clicked, not loud, a subtle metal catch giving way. He waved it off. Theater. A bright new bend of begging. Another story he would forget by morning. The boy put the things away, said that tomorrow the man would stand. Then he left without asking for money, a card, a name. He slipped into the thin band of shadow where old trees lean over low buildings, and the street cleaners know every first name. The guards waited for an order. He gave none. He only sat, feeling the bench's wood creak, and for the first time in years he did not want the scene to end. He woke to pain, not the daily one, a different one, alive. Muscles under skin seemed to recall a language they had forgotten. A finger stirred, the wrist answered, the shoulder tightened. He called the nurse, then a doctor, then a whole team. Tests, familiar phrasing that always sounded the same: movement, instability, observation. He nodded, but inside he kept repeating a single sound, a click, as if an old lock relented and the door eased forward. By morning he tried to stand. He found the armrest, pressed down, and slowly, carefully, like someone moving through a dark room where a thin hope might wake at a wrong step, he rose. One step, then a second. The world swayed, but did not fall. He did not cry, did not laugh. He simply stood, breathing hard, understanding one plain thing: this was not an accident. That day, without guards and without the armor of a suit, he went back to the park. He chose a bench that watched 3 paths at once. He asked the kids about the one with a red stethoscope. Shrugs. A chin jerked toward the old blocks by the road. Someone mentioned a basement room and a woman who called everyone to the table by name. He listened, memorizing, and for the first time in a long time felt not the cold weight in his body, but a small, warm impatience. The basement smelled of damp, soup, and old wood. A dull sign on the door threatened demolition soon, as if even the letters were tired of warning. Behind it was the low noise that offices never make, the sound of life going on the only way it can. A middle-aged woman looked up. Her eyes were weary but warm. "Are you the one he spoke about?" He nodded. She nodded back and called Lucas. Lucas came out unhurried, smoke in his jacket, nicks on his hands, a clear, not childish gaze. He stood without swagger. Said they could talk here at the table. He spoke simply. "They live here. These buildings were written off when people like you drew new lines in clean rooms. Compensation never reached them. Those who could leave left. Those who could not stayed, hiding from rain and from plans made far away. The papers bear your name." He did not argue. He let the words fall like rain. He asked to see the rooms. The corridor stretched like old film, stains on walls, cracked radiators, windows plugged with cardboard. In one room, children slept in narrow beds. In another, an old man sorted screws into tins. In a third, a teenager tuned a dead radio. His eye took in every detail with the same cool precision he once used for return on investment. Only the sheet's left column had a new title now. Not profit. Need. He noted leaks, shocks, medicines that had run out. Once he hunted where to place money. Today he hunted where it hurt. By evening the sky split open. The roof over the far wing behaved like a sieve. Water ran in bands. The first splash hit a girl's narrow bed. Carmen caught it with a basin. Lucas dragged a ladder. A neighbor grabbed a roll of plastic. He, a man fluent in 100 design terms who had never touched a nail, took a hammer. Up 2 rungs, braced the sheet while the boy drove nails. His hands shook from habit's absence. His shoulders burned. Yet inside, everything calmed, as if someone had dragged out the useless furniture from a room and made space to live. He slept in the corridor on a tired mattress. His phone lay within reach. One dial could bring crews, a generator, flashing lights and cameras. He did not reach. Sometimes help turns into decor if you do not strip it bare. The speed needed here was a different one. Slow, quiet, stubborn. He rose before daylight, mopped the floor, wrung the heavy rag, carried trash, took out an old notebook and began a list. Apartments, people, problems, supplies. Lucas laid his crumpled pad beside it. Their lines matched, almost to the mark. He smiled small. Long words would have been wrong here. By midday they had walked the nearby entries, one dry but dark, one bright but the plank gave way, one sour with mold, where children knew the fungus by name, like a toy. He listened, stopping himself each time an elegant solution wanted to leap out. Smart advice is lighter than work with your hands. Lighter is not better. He held his tongue and learned. The screwman knew a stash of good pipe. The radio kid could sniff shorts in minutes. The woman on the 3rd floor baked bread that might become breakfast in the far wing. Each case he tagged with a concrete action, not a slogan. On the 2nd evening, Carmen set a bowl in front of him, the way you set a place for someone who belongs. Fat soup with the music of bay leaf. It made him drowsy, but he forced himself to finish the list. At the bottom, 24 new points. Strangely, that did not weigh him down. It clarified tomorrow. First, they sealed the worst tear. Plastic, slats, screws, a ladder that wobbled, fear that it would slip, and the plain, stubborn hold that kept it. When the roof quit crying, a sigh rolled through the wing like a quiet cue from an invisible conductor. Then they replaced the live wire in the corridor. Then they set a door watch at night. Then they took a woman to the clinic and left with the right paper, without the shaming dance. By the third day, people called him by name. No title, no stiff voice, just, "Alejandro, hand me the level. Alejandro, check this tap. Alejandro, look, I am getting it." For years, people had addressed his position and not him. Those words rang like an empty pan. This sounded different. The word power left his head. A smaller word took its place. Work. On the fourth day, a scuffle broke out. Two teens grabbed at each other the way you grab at air when you have no better weight. He stepped between them, caught one gaze, then the other, and quietly listed what had to be done today, item by item from the pad. Irritation blinked, then respect. They left without a word and came back an hour later with a box of door hinges. He took the box and nodded like you nod to your own. At week's end, he allowed himself 10 minutes on the threshold to do nothing. Children chased a ball. A neighbor cheated at dominoes. Carmen cut thick slices of bread and handed them out as if they were tickets to a train that only runs to places where someone is waiting. He listened to this ordinary life and felt something inside settle for good. He was not hiding behind loud lines anymore. He was not bargaining with fate. He was simply staying and doing. The plan did not come from a round table or a glossy deck. It emerged from work, the way a shoreline emerges from fog when you wait for morning. At dawn, House 1, mark leaks, drafts, the bad crackle in the wires. At noon, carry sheets, strap the plastic, brace the edges the rain likes to find. At dusk, sit on the step and write a short, blunt chain for tomorrow. Lucas moved tools, pointed to the neighbor with a welder, the cousin with a drill. Names, not titles. Each line bore a person whose hands knew what they were doing. He called numbers he once used for contracts. Address, boards, screws, paint, shovels. No hint of barter or gain, just the need to make a place breathe. Some said no. Some showed up, unloaded, left. He thanked them briefly because long gratitude sounds fake in rooms like these. Within days, a shelf in the yard held tidy stacks. Lucas nailed up a note with rules: how much to take, when to return, where to leave what is left. The rules ran on shared responsibility, not threats. Carmen steered the kitchen like a captain. Morning smelled of coffee. By lunch, a soup. By evening, baked comfort that glued people better than any meeting. She knew every child's name, who feared the dark, who was shy about seconds, who needed to hear that they were doing fine. Sometimes, right before she served, she sat a moment with her eyes closed, guarding a small inner flame you should never spend carelessly. Lucas read her face and steadied. A tiny nod from her moved his shoulders into place. The cracks showed quietly. Her breath went ragged. Her skin turned paper pale. He heard it in the house's chorus, an extra beat where calm should be. Lucas led him to the bed in the morning. Hot temples, cold hands, uneven breath. He called a nurse he trusted. They rattled through potholes in an old van to the clinic. Light there is harsh, and air smells like alcohol and plastic. The doctor listened and looked and ordered the blood. Hours later she came back, entirely calm. One kidney down, the other near the cliff. Little time, start dialysis, find a donor. He said at once he would pay. She nodded. Money eases logistics. It does not produce a match. Tissue does that. Lucas stood with fists hard enough to blanch the knuckles and stopped being a teenager in that instant. For him, her beds were more than beds. They were the center of gravity. He heard in the doctor's voice not data, but a timer. They went back. Lucas placed his palms on her hand, whispered like he had whispered by the plane tree. Lamplight cut shadows, and in those shadows he was again the boy who thinks you can tie a broken world back together with thread. He waited for the same wonder. Wonders do not punch a clock. He opened his eyes and looked at the man the way you look at a mirror you are afraid of. He said what was hardest to say. I will try myself. Morning, tests. The numbers returned fast and right. Near perfect compatibility. Alongside stood other words: age, risk, future lines. The doctor spoke plain. For someone his age, to donate is too heavy a cost. Too many roads ahead to cut short with noble impulse. Lucas listened without dropping his eyes, and forgot to breathe for a beat. He did not argue. He asked who then. The doctor looked at the man, not an order, a fact. He sat on a waxed bench in a hallway painted in a color that never had a real name. Inside him the old helpers stirred. Rare clinic, famous specialist. Pay to skip a line. He knew every shortcut. Behind the glass lay the woman who had fed an entire house with warmth when he himself had nothing inside but frost. Lucas stood across from him and said nothing. There was no pressure in that silence, only trust, which is heavier to carry than any plea. He remembered holding the sheet while nails went in through the rain. The shake, the ache, the quiet that follows doing. He called his doctor. The man asked about risks, then about motive, then dropped the professional tone and spoke like a friend. Choose dry and choose clear. Yes or no. No fog. He said yes. Then came the work that never shows well on camera. Labs, scans, board, consents, more labs. The team said it could be done with discipline and a long road back. Discipline he could do. He did not write anyone about it. He did not posture. He walked the bright corridor where antiseptic wins the day, offered his arm, signed his name, and understood that for the first time in years, his signature did not buy control or profit. It gave. Night before surgery, he went back to the house. The same noises, domino whispers, kitchen laughter, a hush on the stairs. Carmen slept. Lucas sat by the door and stood when he entered. They nodded. No more was needed. He crossed to the window and watched the yard. This time there would be no click. There would be surgeons, pain, and days measured in inches. Honest. Morning light in an operating room is not like day. It has less world and more accuracy. He lay back and heard his own first line tossed in a park like a stone. I will give 1,000,000 to whoever heals me. If he could speak to that version of himself, he would say, sometimes the healing that counts is what you give, not what you get. He did not say it aloud. He breathed out and let the light dim. Afterward, time broke into blanks and flashes, wheels, A nurse's calm. Inside was empty and hurting, but the pain made sense, like a ticket taken at the door and forgotten once the music starts. He asked first about Carmen. The nurse smiled. The graft was taking, numbers steady, a long road ahead for both, no room for bravado. He nodded. Road was the right word. Lucas slipped in as soon as they allowed, one hand on the frame like a rail. For the first time in days he looked his age again. "Thank you," he said low. It fell like a nail into wood, holding the sheet where water used to get in. Do not play the hero. Listen to the doctors. Do not pretend it is over. The man smirked a little, warmer than before. Do your job, doctor. I will do mine. He returned slowly but truly. First to the drips tick, then to the whisper of cloth, then to his own breathing, which now belonged to him again. Pain was honest, a bill you write to yourself and then pay. He did not hunt for a mirror in someone else's eyes. He found the steps he could take today. The doctor laid out the first weeks. Strict schedule, meds on time, easy on strain, careful with people. He nodded and asked not about getting back to the old life. He did not want it. He asked how to enter the new one correctly. He stood by the window and saw the city like a river. Cars, shoulders, poster faces, hurry. He no longer wanted to be above it. He wanted to be inside and on time. He could smell the basement again, hear a pot, a laugh. Lucas flipping a page to the duty roster. That is where he belonged now, not as a position, as a name on a schedule. The first day out, he did not visit the big desk. He went to the corridor that used to shock. He walked in quietly, not to break the pace they had built. The house met him as you meet someone who left and returned when needed. No fanfare, no fuss. Lucas stood to greet him the way equals stand. Carmen slept with easy breath. That was better than any speech. He sat by the door where you sit if you are willing to take a night shift. Tea came. Cinnamon said, "Your joy sensors still work." He left a short note asking to be woken if anything turned. Next morning he brought medicines after clearing them with his doctor. That night he wrote down where the emergency contacts hung and who had keys. His body was careful. Any mistake tugged under the ribs, but he did not fear it. He planned not for display, for outcomes. Roofs first because the rain had a long forecast. Then, with the radio boy, he replaced the sparking switches. Then he sat with a woman for whom a clinic visit was a mountain and rehearsed the steps until the front desk would not turn her to stone. Evenings he checked lists, not from suspicion, from attention. Systems run not on the loud word control, but the quiet word care. People stopped him on stairs to say thank you. He nodded and kept moving. Gratitude evaporates fast. Better that by night the halls do not smell of damp, the bulbs do not blink, the girl with the bad tooth does not cry, because Lucas stood beside her at the chair. Those tiny outcomes gave him the same inner click he once reserved for big wins. Only this sound no longer rang hollow. It kept him on course. Doctors were plain about the permanent rules. Pills at the same hour, seasons of caution, tests, hygiene. He did not bargain. He saw discipline as the price of admission to the work he chose. He even felt grateful for its grip. It gave each day an edge within which he could move freely. He learned to stop before empty and show up again tomorrow. That was worth more than a single grand push. They asked him to a small meeting, not a show, a real one. Narrow room, hand-drawn map on the wall, papers on a table. Lucas ran it like a person who had chosen responsibility and was not afraid of it. Tasks out, feedback in. Where do we leak energy? He watched the boy watch people. No fear of no, no ego in yes. For a moment his chest tightened with a strange, clean pride. He once thought leaders are minted on stages. Turns out they are shaped in rooms with low ceilings and maps done in pencil. Weeks later, Lucas brought news that made the man's palms close hard for an instant. The answer came early. He was accepted. First year. A path that trains people to go where it is hard and messy, not where it is glossy. The man listened and did not lay a grand plan on the boy. No talk of donors and ladders. Only asked which duties Lucas needed to pass on so the house would not sag while he studied. They filled a table together, spread the load, noted risks. That evening he sat in the corridor and breathed in the faint paint smell on a fresh frame. A meaning had moved into his life that would not blow away at the first weather. The building that had exhaled dust for years began to change the slow, stubborn way a person changes when they choose to live differently. First, scrub walls and strip the tired paint. Then level the floor so the invisible lip stops making bruises. Then frame bright rooms for classes where books share space with simple toolkits and jars of seedlings along the sills. Children's art lined the hall not for reports, but to remind anyone walking why they walk. In the kitchen, cinnamon became a signal that the day was on track. Next to it, they set aside a small corner where you could sit and be heard without being fixed. The most important decision was not the class schedule. It was the care board by the door, so priorities could not be confused. At the top, who needs help today? Next, who is free to watch the small ones while others run errands? Then a list of tasks that drain and give nothing back, the kind you cut without guilt. Lucas updated that board nightly. No ritual, no applause. This was the new kind of public, not stages. Visibility and shared load. Soon, neighbors from farther blocks showed up. Pasta bags. Offers to teach how to fix the home things people throw away. A soft-voiced man asked if he might read aloud to kids from the books that sit unused in his flat. He watched trust accumulate like water in a cistern. You do not harvest it in one rain. They did not stage an opening as a party. They set a day to show the work. People came who had stayed. People came who had left and missed it. 2 teachers from the school. A doctor from the clinic who already knew their names. Carmen entered last, slower, leaning on Lucas. The room rose not out of custom, but because they could not do otherwise. She smiled and took a seat against the wall, where her eyes could hold everyone. Lucas stepped to the borrowed mic, and quiet fell. He spoke briefly. When I played doctor in the park, it was a game. Work looks the same, only from far. In games, you feed on attention. In work, you feed on meaning. There is a place here where you can learn and do at once. If you have only half an hour, come for half an hour. If you have no strength, sit and listen to the house breathe. If you want to help and lack a skill, someone will show you where to start. Heads nodded the way they nod when a voice matches the thought you had but could not phrase. They offered the man a word. He did not crave the floor, but silence here might be mistaken for distance. He stood and said he had long confused influence with presence. He thought controlling signatures meant he mattered. Now he knows the ones who matter are the ones who stay when there is nothing left to show. He did not name Lucas. He did not mention the surgery. Wrong tone. He spoke about work. That walls hold because of small things that never make a photo. That children's laughter and hot stew set mortar better than cement. That anyone can be a brace for 5 minutes. He ended by asking people to walk the rooms, meet the volunteers, and read the board at the door. A representative from the institute where Lucas would study said a few spare words. They wanted students who came not for white coats, but for the skill of holding a hand. He shook the boy's hand like an equal. The man watched the calm with which Lucas received it. Warmth in, air out, windows open. That evening, the three of them sat in the kitchen while tea cooled too fast. Carmen looked at both of them like someone who had kept a small flame alive until it became 2 steady candles. She told them to remember the most important rule: do not burn for show. Do not confuse burden with duty. Rest and laugh, or any system turns into a cage. She said it without sermon, the way a cook tells you how not to scorch a pie. They nodded and smiled. Best note of the day. Before sleep, he filled his notebook. First line, the classroom opened. Second, a doctor agreed to weekly talks for parents. Third, the teens built their own corner of tools. Fourth, 2 neighbors needed help with papers. He put a point and closed the book. The day was not loud, but it was rich, the right kind of rich. The park greeted him like an old friend who knows your voice and never rushes you. Leaves shared news with each other above the paths. The swings kept their old voice, only now it carried a steadier music. The sound a place makes when it is not perfect, but it cares. He did not sit on the old bench. That mark on the map belonged to the past. He chose one near the playground, where laughter cut the air and stitched it back together. He thought of the boy who once came without asking for anything, or trying to prove a thing, who set small treasures on a stranger's knees. And in that act there was more starting than saving. Sometimes someone turns your light on. More often, the light begins when you take your own hand off the switch. He thought of Carmen, her thick slices of bread, her refusal to sort people into us and them. He thought of a house that now breathes easier, of corridors that hold steady light, of pads with lines never empty. He remembered the first time someone said his name without a title, and how simple breathing became after that. He rose and walked the alley. Each step came with a clear thanks to a body that had finally become his ally. At the bend he looked at the tree whose shade had once hid his anger. The look was calm, almost kind. The look you give an old photo you keep not for shame, but to remember a road you will not take again. He understood what a dozen books try to teach and fail. Real change is not liquid and not one-off. It is a craft. Hands and heart know it, and each day you do it a little better. He returned to the door where the care board hung. Someone had added a chalk line under the lists. Thanks to those who stay. He smiled and took it as a reminder. not as a crown. Later, he helped the teens fix a fan that squeaked like an old man telling a long story. He drank cinnamon tea, and for the first time in a long while, allowed himself to plan nothing. He listened to the house breathe. That breath became his barometer. If it was even, things were right. If it skipped, he would stand and begin again. Before bed, he opened the notebook and wrote just a few words. Continue. Explain. Do not rush. Do not act the hero. Do what you can and learn from those who do it better. He closed it. The world had not become ideal. That is its honesty. But it now held people who know how to hold a hand when it hurts. He was one of them. That was enough to wake tomorrow, drink tea, and go where he is needed. If you stayed to the end, this story touched something that matters. Tell me in the comments which moment was your click and why. Tap like so this reaches someone who needs a gentle push. And tap the screen to jump into the next story. There is another choice waiting there, and another set of small acts that add up to a solid life.